every night at the same silent minute. Just before the town drifted into its deepest sleep, a single sound crossed the empty street. One slow, careful footstep. Then another. Then stillness. The sound always stopped at the same place, right outside one narrow apartment door, on the third floor of a fading brick building at the quiet edge of an American town. No knock. No voice. No shadow sliding under the yellow hallway light. Only waiting. Inside that apartment lived a man named Elian Cade. A man most people barely noticed, and those who did remembered him only as quiet and polite. The kind of person who held doors open for strangers, who tipped too much at small diners, who ended conversations gently before anyone could ask where he came from or why he stayed alone. He worked the late shift at a roadside gas station near the highway exit, a place where truck engines hummed through the darkness, and neon lights flickered like tired stars that refused to disappear. Elian preferred the night, because night asked nothing from him. No smiles. No memories. No past. But 3 weeks ago, the footsteps began. And since then, the night no longer felt empty. It felt aware. The first time he heard the sound, he told himself it was nothing. Just another tenant returning home late. Old buildings carry noise in strange drifting ways. Pipes whisper. Floorboards sigh. And strangers pass without meaning. He ignored it. The second night, the footsteps paused outside his door longer than before. Not moving. Not leaving. Elian stood beside the kitchen sink holding a glass of water he forgot to drink, waiting for a knock that never came. After several minutes, the steps slowly faded down the hallway. He told himself it still meant nothing. By the fifth night, he stopped turning on the television, because he wanted silence. He wanted proof the sound was ordinary. But nothing about the footsteps felt ordinary. Each step sounded careful, measured, as if the person already knew exactly where his door was, as if they had walked to it many times before. On the seventh night, Elian pressed his eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. No movement. No closing stairwell door. No shadow turning the corner. Only yellow light. And a silence that felt heavier than sound. He did not sleep after that. Morning arrived like it always did. Soft sunlight across sidewalks. Children waiting beside bright school buses. The smell of fresh coffee drifting from a corner diner where the same three men argued gently about weather and baseball. Normal life. Simple life. The kind of life Elian once believed he could return to. But normal life had ended long before the footsteps began. He carried that truth quietly, like a letter folded and hidden where no one could find it. At the gas station, customers came and went without noticing the change in his eyes. Except one, an older woman who arrived every Tuesday just before dawn, driving a pale blue car older than the building he lived in. She always bought the same things. Black coffee, 2 packets of sugar, nothing more. Her name was Noreen Hale, though most people simply called her Miss Hale. Not out of closeness, but out of long habit. She watched people carefully, the way someone does after living too long with unanswered questions. On the 10th night of footsteps, Elian's hands trembled while counting change, a few coins slipping from his fingers onto the counter with a thin metallic sound. Miss Hale noticed. She did not ask what was wrong. Not immediately. Instead, she spoke softly, saying he looked like someone who had forgotten how to rest. Her voice carried no judgment, only recognition. Elian forced a small practiced smile, the safe kind he used with everyone. Just tired, he said. But even he could hear how fragile the lie sounded. Miss Hale studied his face for a quiet moment, as if measuring something invisible beneath the surface. Then she nodded slowly, not convinced, but willing to wait, because some truths, she understood, arrive in their own time. That night, the footsteps returned, closer than before, stopping so near the door that Elian imagined he could feel breath through the wood. He stood in the dark living room with the lights off, heart beating too fast, Every memory he tried to bury rising like cold water in the dark. Minutes passed. Still no knock. Only presence. And for the first time, a thought formed that he could not push away. What if the person outside was not lost? Not mistaken? Not confused? What if they were waiting for him? The idea settled deep inside his chest, heavy and certain, because there had once been a night, years ago, when someone had waited for him in exactly the same silent way. A memory from another town, another life, one he never spoke about, one tied to rain, to broken light, to a choice that could never be undone. Elian stepped slowly toward the door, each movement careful, as if sudden sound might shatter something fragile in the air. His hand hovered above the lock. One voice inside him whispered to open it, to end the fear, to face whatever waited. Another voice, quieter and older, told him not yet. He stood there caught between past and present, between knowing and refusing to know. Outside, the footsteps did not move. They simply remained, waiting with a patience that felt almost familiar. And in that long, unmoving silence, Elian understood something that made the room feel smaller. Whoever stood beyond the door knew he was inside, awake, listening, because the waiting felt shared, as if both sides of the door were holding the same breath. Far across town, a distant freight train horn drifted through the darkness, low and lonely, like a warning arriving too late. The sound pulled memories to the surface. Rain striking shattered glass, red lights flashing across wet pavement, a name carried away by wind, and silence that followed. He closed his eyes, but the past did not disappear. It never truly had. 3 weeks of footsteps, and now the distance between then and now felt dangerously thin. His fingers finally touched the cold metal of the lock. Real. Final. If he opened the door, everything hidden might return. If he kept it closed, the waiting would continue. And somehow, that felt worse. The hallway beyond remained silent. But silence can speak. And this silence whispered that time was running out. Elian drew one slow, careful breath, the kind taken before stepping into deep, unseen water. Then, a sound. Not a knock. Something softer, almost like fingertips brushing lightly across the surface of the door. Testing. Remembering. His heart stopped for a single fragile second, long enough for fear to shift into something else. Recognition. Because he had heard that exact sound once before, on a night he promised himself never to recall. A night when someone stood outside another door, in another place, asking for help he did not give. The memory struck sharp and clear, and with it came a truth he could no longer escape. The footsteps were not random. They were connected. To him. To the past. To something unfinished. Slowly. Carefully. Elian leaned forward until his forehead rested against the cool wood. On the other side. No movement. Only that quiet presence. Still waiting. His voice emerged barely louder than breath. "What do you want?" No answer came. Only silence stretching deeper than before. Yet he felt certain the question had been heard. Because the waiting changed slightly. Like the pause before something begins. Time passed. Seconds or minutes he could not tell. Then, the footsteps moved. Not away. Closer. So close they should have been impossible. As if the unseen figure stood inches from the other side. Then again. Nothing. Complete stillness. So complete it felt unnatural. Like the world itself was holding back sound. Elian opened his eyes slowly. Fear rising again. Mixed now with a fragile, unfamiliar hope. Because a hidden part of him, the part buried deepest in memory, had been waiting too. Waiting for the past to return. Waiting for truth to demand an answer. Waiting for silence to finally break. Outside the door, the presence remained. Inside, a quiet thought formed that he had never allowed before. Maybe this is not about fear. Maybe this is about forgiveness. But forgiveness for what? And from whom? He did not yet know. Somewhere in the building. A clock began to strike midnight, each distant chime echoing upward like a slow counting of time running out. When the final note faded, silence returned once more, heavier than before, and in that silence, one question rose, quiet, unavoidable. Who was standing outside his door, every midnight? And why, after all these years, had they finally come back? Morning did not bring peace. Light entered the apartment slowly, touching the walls, the empty chair near the window, the door that had remained closed through the long night. Elian had not slept. He had only waited for daylight to make everything feel less real. But the memory of the soft brushing sound on the door stayed sharp, clear, undeniable. Daylight could not erase it. He moved through the morning quietly, as if sound itself might invite the footsteps back. Washing a cup that was already clean, folding a jacket he would soon wear again, watching the street below without truly seeing it. People passed with ordinary purpose. A woman walking a restless dog, a delivery truck stopping too long at the curb, two teenagers laughing at something small and forgettable. Normal life continued, unaware that something had shifted in the quiet third-floor hallway. Elian told himself he would ignore it tonight. That he would not stand by the door, not listen, not wonder. But even as the thought formed, he knew it was a lie, because the waiting had already entered him. At the gas station that evening, the air smelled like gasoline and burnt coffee, a familiar scent that usually kept his thoughts simple. Not tonight. Every sound felt sharper, every shadow slightly wrong, every passing car too slow. Miss Hale arrived just before dawn again. Same pale blue car. Same careful steps toward the counter. She looked at him longer this time, not hiding her concern. You did not rest, she said softly. Elian tried to answer, but the words stayed somewhere behind his teeth. Silence can reveal more than speech, and she seemed to understand that. After a moment she asked a different question. Is something waiting for you? The words struck deeper than he expected, because they were too close to truth. He could have denied it, could have smiled and changed the subject. Instead he asked quietly, "Why would you say that?" Miss Hale stirred sugar into her coffee slowly, watching the dark liquid turn lighter. "Because I have seen that look before," she said. "People carry it when the past begins walking toward them again." Elian felt a chill move through him. Not from fear alone, but from recognition. She was not guessing. She was remembering. He wanted to ask what she meant, wanted to know how much she understood. But another customer entered, breaking the moment. And when he looked back, she was already walking toward the door. Some truths arrive slowly, she said without turning. And sometimes they knock until we listen. The bell above the door rang once. Then she was gone. Her words stayed behind. All night they stayed. By the time his shift ended, exhaustion pressed heavily on his shoulders. Yet dread pulled him back toward the apartment, toward midnight, toward the door, toward the waiting. The hallway was empty when he arrived, too quiet even for an old building. He stood inside his apartment with the lights off again, not because he planned to listen, but because darkness felt honest. Minutes passed. His heartbeat grew louder, counting time he did not want to reach. Then, footsteps. Slow, measured, certain, crossing the hallway exactly as before, stopping at his door. Every muscle in his body tightened. Yet he did not move away. Something inside him no longer wanted escape. The silence outside felt different tonight. Heavier, closer, almost expectant. And with that feeling, a memory pushed forward stronger than before. Rain falling hard against a windshield. Streetlights blurred into long streaks of gold. A voice beside him saying his name. Not in fear, but in trust. Then another sound. Metal folding. Glass breaking. The sudden violent end of motion. Elian's breath caught. He had spent years burying that night, changing towns, changing jobs, changing everything except memory, because memory follows, even when footsteps do not. Outside the door, the unseen presence remained, waiting, not angry, not violent, just patient. And patience can be more frightening than rage. Elian stepped closer, until only the thin door separated him from whatever truth stood there. His hand lifted again toward the lock, trembling less this time, because fear was slowly changing shape, turning into something else, a need to know. Before his fingers touched the metal, a new sound reached him, not from outside, from below, near the building entrance. A door closing, then voices, low, unfamiliar, footsteps on the stairs, different from the midnight ones, faster, uncertain. They stopped on the second floor. A pause, then quiet again. Elian's heart pounded harder, confusion mixing with dread. Two presences, not one. The thought unsettled him deeply, because the waiting outside his door felt singular, personal, intentional. The sounds below felt ordinary, random, yet both existed at the same time. Minutes stretched. The midnight footsteps never knocked, never spoke. Finally, slowly, they moved away. Not hurried, not disappointed, simply gone. Elian stood frozen long after the sound faded, as if movement might erase the fragile connection that had almost formed. When he finally slept, dreams came quickly. He was standing on a dark road, rain falling again. A car door opened beside him, someone calling his name from far away, not in anger, but in sorrow. He tried to reach the voice, but his feet would not move. And from behind him, soft footsteps approached. He woke before they reached him. Morning light felt colder than before. Something had changed. Not outside. Inside him. Because the fear was no longer only about danger. It was about memory returning whole. And memory carries consequences. That evening, instead of going straight to work, Elian walked across town, without fully deciding where he meant to go. His feet followed streets he rarely used, past closed storefronts, past quiet houses, until he stopped in front of a small place he had avoided since moving here. A diner with wide windows and warm yellow light. The smell of coffee drifted out as someone opened the door. Familiar, comforting, dangerous in its normalcy. Inside, Miss Hale sat alone in a corner booth, as if she had known he would come. She did not look surprised, only patient. Elian slid into the seat across from her, hands clasped together to hide their shaking. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he asked the question that had followed him all day. How do you know about the past coming back? Miss Hale looked into her coffee, seeing something far older than the reflection. Because, she said quietly, sometimes the past does not stay buried. Sometimes it waits for us to be ready to open the door. Her words settled heavily between them. Elian felt the edge of something approaching, a truth just beyond reach. And for the first time, he wondered if the footsteps were not a threat, but a message from a night that had never truly ended. Outside the diner window, evening deepened toward darkness, toward midnight, toward the door, and the question waiting there. End of Part 2. Part 3, Act 3 build up. Night returned with quiet certainty, as if nothing in the world had changed. But inside Elian, everything felt closer to breaking. The walk back to his apartment felt shorter than usual, each streetlight passing like a slow countdown, each shadow stretching longer than it should. He carried Miss Hale's words with him, turning them over again and again. Sometimes the past waits, she had said, until we are ready to open the door. Ready. The word felt impossible. How could anyone be ready to face the moment that ended a life, and divided their own into before and after? Yet the footsteps kept coming, and waiting had begun to feel like another kind of choice. Inside the apartment, the silence greeted him like something alive. He did not turn on the lights. Darkness felt honest now, like a place where truth could finally speak. Minutes passed slowly, breath by breath. Then midnight approached, not with sound, but with a feeling in the air, a stillness that warned of arrival. And right on time. Footsteps, crossing the hallway, steady, unchanging, certain of where they belonged. Stopping at his door, Elian closed his eyes, not to hide, but to listen deeper. His fear was still there, but something stronger stood beside it now. Recognition, because the rhythm of the steps felt familiar, not to his ears, but to memory, like walking beside someone long ago, matching pace without thinking. The silence outside settled again. Waiting, always waiting. A question rose inside him, clearer than before. What if the door was never meant to stay closed? The thought frightened him, yet also brought strange relief, because endless waiting is heavier than truth. Slowly, he stepped forward, closer than he had ever stood before, only inches from the door, from the past, from whatever waited beyond. His hand lifted, resting against the wood, cold, solid, real. On the other side, no movement, but he felt presence, certain as breath. Memories surged again, stronger, no longer fragments. The storm, the road, the sudden light, the sound of impact that split time in two. And afterward, silence, except for one voice, weak, calling his name, trusting he would answer, trusting he would stay. But he had run. Fear had moved his feet. Not cruelty, not indifference, only terror too large to carry. Yet leaving had written a story he could never rewrite. Outside the door, the waiting continued, patient as guilt. Tears blurred his vision, though he did not remember beginning to cry. Years of silence pressing outward at once. "I am here," he whispered, not knowing who he spoke to. The hallway, the memory, himself. For the first time, the silence outside changed. Not sound, not movement, but something softer, like listening, as if the unseen presence had waited only for those words. Hope flickered painfully in his chest. Could forgiveness wait this long? Could the past return for something other than punishment? His fingers slid slowly toward the lock. Every second felt endless. This time, he did not stop. The metal turned softly beneath his hand. A sound so small, yet louder than any crash from years ago. The door remained closed. Only the lock released. He froze, breathing hard, heart racing like it might escape his chest. Outside, no footsteps moved, only stillness. One thin barrier remained. Wood, hinges, choice. Elian rested his forehead against the door again, eyes closed, standing at the edge of everything he feared. If he opened it, there would be no more distance, no more denial, no more waiting, only truth. Behind him, the apartment felt already empty, as if the life he built here understood it was ending. Ahead of him, the unknown waited quietly, not forcing, not demanding, only present. He whispered one final question, voice breaking. Why now? For the first time, something answered. Not words, a sound, so faint he almost believed it imagined. A single soft breath, on the other side of the door. Not threatening, not angry, simply there. And with that breath, a realization formed slowly, clearer than anything before. The footsteps had never come to harm him. They had come because something unfinished still needed to be seen, needed to be faced, needed to be forgiven. Elian opened his eyes. His hand moved to the handle, and as the moment stretched toward decision, toward revelation, toward the end of waiting, the story of that long-forgotten night, the truth he had buried for years, rose fully at last. ready to step through the door with him. The handle felt colder than the lock had been, as if it carried the weight of every year he tried to forget. Elian's fingers rested there, not moving, not pulling away. Behind him, the apartment stood silent and small, a temporary shelter built from distance and denial, a place that had never truly been home. Ahead of him, only a thin sheet of wood separated him from the truth, from memory, from whatever had crossed time to stand waiting in the dark. His breath trembled once, then slowly steadied. For weeks he had feared this moment. Yet now that it had arrived, fear no longer felt sharp. It felt tired, like something ready to end. He turned the handle. The sound was soft, almost gentle, yet it echoed through him louder than any crash from the past. The door opened only a few inches at first, slow, careful, as if the night itself were holding its breath. Cold hallway air slipped inside, carrying the faint scent of dust and old paint. Ordinary, real. For a second, he saw nothing, only the dim yellow light, the empty stretch of hallway, the worn carpet leading toward the stairwell. His heart stumbled in confusion. Had the waiting finally stopped? Had the footsteps ended the moment he chose to face them? But then, a shape shifted just beyond the edge of the door, so still it almost blended with shadow. Someone was there, not close, not reaching, simply standing. Elian opened the door wider, every movement slow enough to feel like crossing years instead of inches. The figure remained quiet, patient, familiar in a way that made his chest ache before his mind understood why. It was not a stranger. It was someone shaped by memory, by rain, by a night he had replayed in silence more times than he could count. A face he had tried to believe he would never see again. Not broken, not angry, only calm, and impossibly present. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway light flickered softly above, casting shadows that moved like slow water across the walls. Elian felt tears rising before a single word formed, because some recognitions lived deeper than language. The past had not come as punishment. It had come as truth. His voice finally emerged. Fragile, unsteady. "I thought you were gone." The figure's expression did not change, yet something gentle moved through the silence between them, like understanding carried without sound. When the answer came, it was quiet, almost like memory speaking to itself. "I was, but not in the way you believed." The words settled slowly, opening spaces inside him he had kept closed for years. Every night since the storm, he had lived with one unspoken certainty, that he had left someone to darkness, that fear had written an ending he could never repair. Yet the presence before him was not an ending. It was continuation. "How?" he whispered, the question carrying every year of guilt inside it. The reply came with the same calm softness. "Some stories do not end in the moment we run. Some moments keep walking beside us, waiting for us to turn around." Elian felt something inside him begin to break open. Not painfully, but with the strange relief of truth finally allowed to breathe. Memories returned fully now, clearer than they had ever been. The storm, the spinning lights, the sound of metal folding into silence. And afterward, movement, hands pulling him from the car, voices shouting, sirens growing closer. He had not seen what happened next, because fear had filled his vision, because survival had felt louder than responsibility, because he believed leaving meant loss. But memory is not always complete, and guilt often writes its own ending. The figure before him stepped slightly closer, still leaving space, still offering choice. "You carried only the part you could see," they said softly, "not the part that came after." Elian's breath caught, hope and sorrow rising together in equal measure. "I searched for you," he said, voice breaking, "but I never found anything." Another quiet answer, "Because you stopped looking where truth lived." The hallway seemed to fade around them, time loosening its grip. past and present standing in the same fragile place. Tears slipped down his face freely now. Years of silence dissolving without resistance. "I was afraid," he admitted. The words small yet heavier than anything he had spoken in years. The figure nodded once. Not in judgment. Only recognition. "Fear is loud in the moment," they said. "But silence is louder afterward." The truth of that sentence moved through him like slow light, touching every hidden corner. For so long, he had believed forgiveness was impossible. That running had defined him forever. Yet the presence before him carried no anger, no accusation, only patience. "Why come now?" he asked, the question softer than before. "Because you finally stopped running," came the reply. "And when running ends, listening can begin." The simplicity of it felt overwhelming, as if the answer had always existed, waiting for him to grow quiet enough to hear it. The hallway clock far below began to move toward another minute, time continuing its steady rhythm. Unaware of the life changing in the space above, Elian felt the weight inside his chest shifting, not disappearing, but transforming, from punishment into understanding. "I don't know how to carry this," he said. "You don't carry it alone," the figure answered gently. For the first time, warmth touched the cold night air between them. Small, fragile, real, and in that warmth, he understood something he had never allowed himself to believe. The footsteps had not come to haunt him. They had come to bring him back, to the moment he left, so he could finally stay. Silence settled again, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful, like the pause after truth is spoken. The figure began to step backward slowly, not fading, not vanishing, just moving away with quiet purpose. Elian felt sudden fear rise again. "Wait," he said quickly, not wanting the moment to end. The figure stopped, watching him with the same calm presence. "What happens now?" he asked. A gentle answer followed. "Now you live. Not before, not after, but here." The meaning settled deep. Simple yet vast. Living meant accepting, remembering, continuing. Living meant forgiveness was not a single moment, but a path. The figure offered one final look, filled not with sadness, but with quiet completion. Then they turned, walking down the hallway with soft measured steps. The same footsteps, the ones that had crossed midnight again and again. This time, they did not stop. They reached the stairwell, paused only briefly, then disappeared from sight. No sound followed, only stillness. But the stillness felt different now, open instead of empty. Elian remained in the doorway for a long time, breathing slowly, feeling the night settle gently around him. Nothing supernatural remained, nothing impossible, only understanding. And sometimes, understanding is the greatest mystery of all. At last, he stepped into the hallway, not chasing, not searching, simply standing where fear had once ruled. The air felt lighter, as if the building itself had been waiting for this quiet ending. He closed the door behind him softly, not to hide, but because hiding was no longer needed. Inside the apartment, the darkness remained, yet it no longer felt heavy. It felt calm, like a room ready for morning. Elian moved to the window, watching the empty street below. Far in the distance, a freight train horn sounded again, low and steady. This time, it did not feel like a warning. It felt like farewell. He placed a hand against the cool glass, feeling something unfamiliar yet certain growing inside his chest. Not relief alone, not happiness. Something quieter, peace, and in that quiet peace, one final understanding settled fully. The footsteps had never been outside his door. They had always been inside him, waiting, patient, unchanging, until he was ready to open. Morning arrived quietly, not with sudden light, but with a slow gentle brightening that touched the edges of the room first. Elian had fallen asleep beside the window without realizing when, his back resting against the wall, his hand still near the cool glass, as if part of him had wanted to remain awake in case the night returned. But the night had ended, and something inside him had ended with it. For the first time in many years, sleep had come without dreams of rain, without broken light, without the sound of metal folding into silence. Only rest, simple and deep. He opened his eyes slowly, half expecting the old weight to return the moment he woke, the familiar pressure in his chest, the quiet guilt waiting at the edge of every thought. But the weight was different now. Not gone completely. Some things never disappear, but softened, like a scar that no longer aches when touched. Sunlight moved across the floor, reaching the door that had stayed closed for so long. The same door he had feared. The same door he had finally opened. It looked ordinary in the morning. Just wood and paint. Nothing mysterious. Nothing haunted. And yet, he knew that everything had changed because of it. He stood carefully, his body stiff from sleeping on the floor, but his breathing calm, steady in a way he did not recognize at first. Silence filled the apartment, but it was not the heavy silence of waiting. It was the quiet of something completed. Outside, the town had already begun its daily rhythm. Cars passing, distant voices, a dog barking somewhere down the street. Life continuing, as it always does, without ceremony, without announcement. For years, Elian had watched mornings like this from a distance, feeling separate from them, as if real life belonged to other people, people who had not run, people who had not left someone behind in the dark. But standing there now, he felt something unfamiliar, belonging, small, fragile, but real. He washed his face in the narrow bathroom sink, watching water carry away the last traces of sleep, and maybe something older than sleep, something that had stayed with him too long. In the mirror, his reflection looked the same tired eyes, same quiet expression, yet not the same, because the person looking back was no longer hiding from memory, no longer turning away from the moment that divided his life. The past had not disappeared, but it had changed shape. It was no longer a closed door. It was a story he could finally carry without fear. He dressed slowly for work, following the same routine as every other morning. But each movement felt lighter, as if invisible weight had been set down during the night. Before leaving, he paused beside the door, not in fear, not in hesitation, only in quiet acknowledgement. A simple breath, in and out. Then he opened it. The hallway stood empty in the clear morning light. No shadows waiting, no footsteps approaching, just worn carpet, pale walls, and the distant sound of someone cooking breakfast in another apartment. Ordinary, completely ordinary. He stepped out, closing the door gently behind him. This time, the sound of it shutting did not feel like hiding. It felt like moving forward. The walk to the gas station seemed different, though the streets had not changed. Sunlight reflected off windows. Children's laughter drifted from a nearby yard. The smell of coffee floated from the small diner on the corner. Details he had stopped noticing years ago. Details that now felt sharp and new, as if the world had quietly continued waiting for him to look up again. At the station, the morning shift had just begun. The same hum of engines, the same low music from an old radio, the same routine he knew by heart. Yet when he stepped behind the counter, something inside him felt steady instead of distant. Customers came and went, offering small nods, casual greetings, simple human moments he once answered automatically. Today, he answered differently, not with forced politeness, but with presence. Even the smallest exchanges felt meaningful, as if being here, truly here, was something he had only just learned to do. Near mid-morning, the pale blue car pulled in slowly. Miss Hale stepped out, moving with the same careful calm as always. When she entered, The bell above the door gave its soft, familiar ring. She looked at him once. Only once. And in that single glance, something passed between them. Quiet understanding. No questions needed. You rested. She said gently. Yes. He answered. The word felt simple, but also like the closing line of a very long chapter. She nodded, as if that was all she needed to hear. Outside, traffic moved steadily along the highway. People traveling toward places they believed mattered, carrying stories no one else could see. Inside the small station, time felt slower, peaceful in its ordinary rhythm. After a moment, she added softly, "Some nights end without sound, but they change everything." Elian felt the truth of that settle warmly in his chest. "Thank you," he said, not only for her words, but for the quiet patience she had offered before he even understood he needed it. She gave a faint smile, the kind that holds both sadness and hope at once. "We all wait outside some door," she replied, "until we are ready to open it ourselves." The bell rang again as another customer entered, and the conversation ended naturally. No dramatic pause, no final speech, just life continuing, as it should. Days began to pass, then weeks. Midnight came and went each night. Silent, empty, peaceful. No footsteps returned. And strangely, he did not miss them, because their purpose had never been to stay, only to lead him back to the moment he had avoided, and guide him through it. Healing did not arrive all at once. Some mornings still carried shadows. Some memories still hurt when they surfaced. But pain was no longer the only thing memory held. There was also understanding. And with understanding, space to breathe. One evening, long after the footsteps had faded into the past, Elian stood again by his window. The street below glowed under soft amber lights. Cars passing slowly. A quiet, peaceful scene like any other night. Far away, a freight train horn sounded across the dark. Low. Steady, no longer lonely. He listened until the sound dissolved into distance. Then he closed his eyes, not to escape, but simply to feel the moment as it was. Calm, complete, enough. When he opened them again, nothing supernatural waited. No mystery, no shadow, only the quiet truth of being alive. Here, now, and sometimes. That is the greatest resolution any story can offer, because not every ending arrives with noise. Not every answer comes with certainty. Some endings are gentle, like footsteps fading down a hallway, leaving behind only peace. And some doors, once opened, never need to close again. If you have ever felt the past standing silently behind you, waiting, patient, unmoving, maybe this story is a reminder. That fear can wait for years, but so can forgiveness. And the moment you finally turn the handle, you may discover nothing is there to harm you, only a quiet chance to begin again.